Just first, I want to call attention a bit more to the levels themselves, I suppose. This mega structure in the story, which Tom Alden, he's sort of spirited away, sort of held prisoner, like a Billy Pilgrim and the Tralfamadorians, inside this strange virtual holographic world, which is a little bit like a video game, is a little bit like Choose Your Own Adventure, is a little bit like fiction or theater, but the idea is to get your way through successive levels, and with each level there's different women, and there's and I was talking the other night with Dan Linden actually about about Tom Alden and his interactions with all these characters level to level, and he said something very interesting, which I actually want to quote. I'll get it up here. He says the character of Tom Alden, he's almost like he's the prism through which all the characters are refracted. Every character is in a way kind of slightly passive. They react or they reflect kind of something which Tom is doing kind of within the narrative itself, and how the way that the external and the internal narrative are so intrinsically linked in this way that Tom has this way that he manipulates everything.
Well, the actual idea for levels, I said I wanted to do since 2016, but it all stemmed from actually about 40 plus years ago when I was in my late teens. When I was about 13 or 14, I had this sort of sexual fantasy about this girl who lived on my block who wanted to have sex with me when we were young, and I didn't do it because she had problems. She had some issues with her weight and her looks, and if she had been confident, I would have. But I didn't want to. I knew I could push her over the edge. So I in my mind though, I had this idea of like a post-apocalyptic fantasy, and as the years went by, that sort of got ingrained in my mind. I would sometimes have dreams, actual dreams, not just waking fantasies. And the girls would change here and there. And so that was the genesis for the idea that there would be many different women, and the idea that maybe these levels should be all females that come and go. And some of them he's less hostile to, some of them he's more hostile to. Another important point that I want to bring in before I forget, though, is this is the first book where I explicitly decided to use some visual, and I used 5 photographs of my wife Jessica as representations of the visualization of Tom's wife, Alenka.
Yes.
And I did that. I initially thought I might do more, like do some hand drawings, because in my mind I was thinking of Kenneth Patchen and some of his books. I don't know if you ever read that. He was a great poet, an okay prose writer, but he was in the 30s and 40s. He was very avant-garde. So I decided to just restrain it to 5 photographs of Jessica, and every so often in the book they pop up. Just as, for example, when Tom has killed a deer, he has that comes back, and then later he also accidentally runs over. Is it an aardvark? No, I forget. But he runs over another animal, and so that adds the element of something has happened. Tom, from the very beginning, with "Where is my wife?" There's some kind of trauma that has been inflicted upon him. We don't know what. Is his wife dead? Is his wife lost? Is he having a dream because he's upset of having accidentally road-killed some animals? Something is off, and that's put him possibly in some other realm.
Yeah, I like there's all sorts of things I really want to get to here. Kind of one, but for instance, this thing about the repetition, the way things kind of loop again and again, but change slightly in the book, like almost glitching, and the use of the pictures as well, kind of the pictures of the character Helenka, and what you do with that too.
And Helenka, by the way, just so, for the record, in a great Woody Allen movie called Another Woman, there's a scene where Jenna Rollins, the main character's lover, played by Gene Hackman, has left her after her bad treatment of him. She has a dream of seeing him, and in the dream he says that he has written a character in his book called Helenka, based upon the Jenna Rollins character. So I said Jessica Helenka. That's good. It's a nice little touch there, I thought. But anyway.
The spectre of Woody Allen appears again in one of the novels.
Yeah.
And I really like how playful you get with. You mentioned Kenneth Patchen, but I was thinking kind of Vonnegut and his use sometimes of illustrations or pictograms. Yeah. But the kind of how playful you get with kind of the use of the pictures. Like I think there's an instance once where you use a picture of Helenka, like one of those missing photographs on the side of a milk carton for missing children. I think Tom Alden sat at a table and he sees Helenka's picture on a carton, and that's how it appears to us on the text. And all these games you play with the kind of the use of the refrain and repetition, which connects brilliantly again. I think to like Tristram Shandy, which is a text which gets referenced surprisingly quite a lot in this book, and the sort of the weird games that Thomas Stern would often play kind of in the text.
Tom seemingly carries a copy of Tristram Shandy, although the book seemingly changes a few times here and there, but it goes back to Shandy.
It's a very curious book. You know, when I read a copy of Tristram Shandy, I got a copy from the library, and I read sort of halfway through, and somebody had actually written in the margin in a bright neon highlighter, "This book is impossible. I don't know how anyone would want to finish this." And I just thought that was delightful. I don't know. But what are your thoughts on Stern and how Tristram Shandy relates to this text?
Well, Tristram Shandy is a book about the identity of Tristram Shandy. Tristram Shandy, the character, is dealing with the memories of his family. He's constantly berating his uncle. Or his again, I looked through. I didn't reread Tristram Shandy, but I took some episodes there. And some of them, you know, you'll go through, and sometimes I'll just sort of flip, and I'll go, "Oh, that's a good thing." And the interactivity happens when, let's say, if I take a section that's dealing with him berating his uncle or something, and I'll take that and say, I'm going to build around that. And so I instead of looking for a specific section that relates to what I'm writing, I'm going to say, "Oh, I like that," and just the way gravity is said to be a warping of space-time, I'll say, I'm going to make my book go around that. And so I wasn't planning on, for example, doing maybe Tom meeting some character or having some cynical remark, but by using a 3 or 4 paragraph selection there, I say, Shandy is being real pissy in this section. Now Tom might be pissy, or maybe I'll make him more reflective. And so that's a way to use another work of art that it influences your book, but you're not using it in a subservient manner. You're actually taking the outside work and twisting your work into something different, and it gives you an impetus to go into a direction that maybe you weren't going to go into before.
Well, that's the thing. As a reader, like reading something like Neville's, where you're absorbing all these different sort of texts and influences, it's just fascinating as a reader to see this kind of lineage suddenly happening between, you know, Patrick McGowan's The Prisoner on one hand, and like Forbidden Planet, and then suddenly on the other hand, like something like Tristram Shandy, or other works. Like it's just really interesting seeing those connections suddenly being made, which once they've been made seem logical, like in a way. This kind of
and you just hit upon it. That's what's called negative capability.
Yeah.
John Keats. Yeah. That when you take two things that you would not have before associated, but you have some form, some art, whatever it might be, that once they are linked together, something goes off and you go, oh, that works. That seems natural. That's that ability. That's what's called negative capability, to bring two seemingly disparate things together. But once they're together, you say, oh, they should have always been together.
Yeah. And we were talking as well about kind of these sort of themes and tropes from sci-fi or sort of mid-century modernism, like especially this sort of thing from The Prisoner or other works that are cited in Levels, like Cube or other things like, where it's almost like architecture as confinement and all this other stuff, and sort of making your way from space to space to space, things being controlled in sort of systematic
right.
sort of
And
flows.
Cube is a good example because Cube is not itself in and of itself great art. It's a good low budget modest sci-fi film from whatever it was, 99, 2000 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's something that a good idea. It's sort of like an extended Twilight Zone episode, and
Yes.
the episodic nature or the picaresque nature, if you want to get fancy, of this book lends itself to those kinds of connections.
Yeah, I think the prisoner is like probably the most sort of, and it's why the prisoner kind of recurs again and again in your own work. I think the fact that it's really emblematic in this sense of kind of this thing where it's almost like everything is turned in on kind of the character itself, and there's actually let's get down to it then again, like this thing about levels, right? When I heard that kind of this book was going to be called Levels, I was kind of startled a bit, because Levels is kind of like an inside joke between me and Mark and some friends. Kind of like, we say if something's good, we say, "Oh, check this out. This is really good. It's Levels, right? This is really good. It's Levels." The idea about, we say something's good, it's got levels, it's got depth, and we experience kind of meaning as a depth, right? Something that's if something's really good, you can just go into it again and again and again, on and on and on. But this also idea of I suppose dimensions too. I mean, this book's called like Neville's A Love Story. That's a title that almost puts me in mind of Flatland, A Romance of Dimensions by Edwin Abbott.
And that's a great book too. That there is a sense, like I said, because remember, a sphere comes along and eventually knocks a square up and out of his comfortable place. Well, Tom Alden is knocked out of his comfortable place very early in that book.
Yes. But to talk, and in that sense, kind of the sense of levels again makes me think of something cumulative. Level on level on level, something building on some. And the experiences of Tom, in a way, character to character to character, in these holograms and these women, and the looping, the repeating of dreams. There is the thing where we have kind of the repetition, or the thing that repeats or redoubles itself, but it's changed in the redoubling or in the multiplication.
Well, yeah, a good example is he has a number of, like I said, fantasies with some of the main five females. There's the one soap actress who's said to be not as good as an actress as the other one, but who seems to be more troubled, and therefore she's more drawn to Tom. He has a number of fantasies with her. He has some fantasies, but probably maybe the most blatant one is with the school teacher that has a fantasy. But this is where I borrow from TV. He has a sexual fantasy about the young school teacher who happens to be a black female, and yet then what happens, just like in a lot of TV shows, that ends and we start back at the beginning of what would be the fantasy, and we see it was a fantasy. She's just coming in and saying goodnight or whatever it might be.
Yeah. I am. I was also going to say the sense of well, Tom Alden is kind of, it could be seen as the dreamer too, or like the whole thing could be seen as the dream of the author or the audience. But I was also going to say that the thing about this book that's also quite striking is how dramatic it is, in a sense, like how there's actually there's people ruminating and thinking and remembering and dreaming. And there's an interesting thing that happens with the switching between the first person and the third person as well, I think, especially with those refrains of the anecdote about Tom Alden running over the baby deer.
Right. Well, the two roadkill ones, the repetitions of those are first person from Tom's voice. The book, you're right, is in the third person, which suggests that there is another element there.